and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Roca. I'm a voiceover artist, occasional actor, but host, writer, and producer of numerous things over at Collider and other places. And I can't tell you how much I'm, looking forward to this episode because we've got a great returning guest, but also I had a bit of a rough day. And so today, talking about this film with you two is just going to make, I know it's going to make my day. It's going to make me go to sleep very, very happy tonight.
And without further ado, I would like to welcome back to the Cine-Files one of our favorite guests of all time, one of the most enthusiastic lovers of film I know, Scott Mantz. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Thank you so much, my friends. It's so great to be back. I swear, doing Cine-Files, talking movies with you is absolutely a highlight. I mean, our shows go on for like 2.5 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like it flies by. And for everyone listening, I am Scott Movie Mantz, and I am an unemployed film critic. And it is great to be working right now with you guys.
Thank you,
talking
man.
about this very
and
special movie.
And everybody should strap in because this might be a long one. You know when Scott comes on, but it's going to be a long one full of a lot of information. So I'm looking forward to it. And energy. Absolutely.
Well, and it's funny. I was thinking about, is this going to be a long one? Because on the one hand, it's a 2.5 hour long movie.
It is.
On the other hand, it is probably the slowest paced movie we've ever done. So there's it's not like there's endless dialogue.
Well, large gaps and no dialogue.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's going to be faster. In another sense, it is one of the deepest and most ambiguous movies probably the most ambiguous movie we've ever done. And of course, we have Scott Mantz here. So,
well, you're talking about a movie that's 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But you were talking about a movie, like you said, sparse dialogue. There is only 40 minutes of dialogue in this movie, and no dialogue for the first 25 minutes of the film.
Well, and I would say a lot of those 40 minutes are almost incidental. Like, it's stuff that's not even, the conversation with the daughter. There's all this stuff.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the plot of the film.
Yeah.
What movie are we talking about, by
The
the
movie
way?
we're talking about is 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick, 1968. This movie is 50 years old.
Yeah.
50 years old, and watching it on the big screen, which you can do for a limited time because it was re-released in 70 millimeter to coincide for this landmark 50th anniversary, supervised by its biggest fan, none other than Christopher Nolan.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Christopher Nolan
I didn't know that.
loves Kubrick. 2001: A Space Odyssey is his favorite movie of all time. And when
That
you
actually
see,
explains a lot.
that explains a lot, especially when you see Interstellar.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Which
there is a Stargate scene, a wormhole scene, a black hole, whatever you want to call it. But so he supervised this restored version, supervised the prints, the 70 millimeter prints, and it did very, very well in its first weekend in limited release. On 4 screens, it made $200,000,
Wow.
which is $50,000 per theater, which is a bigger per theater average than Deadpool 2.
Wow.
Wow. I think that Deadpool 2 double feature with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think that would go really, really well.
Do you start with 2001? Do you start with Deadpool 2?
That is a good- that is a good
I don't
question.
know. I feel like if you got the adrenaline going after Deadpool 2, I mean,
Oh, yeah, you can make it.
yeah,
you
the
could-
cool down is
that's
2001:
true,
Space
that's
Odyssey.
It is a cool down. Scott, do you remember how you first came to the film?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, Steve. I have a great story about my
great.
introduction to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, 2 things happened in 1968. 2001: A Space Odyssey came
3
out,
things happened.
and Scott Mantz was born.
Oh.
And Steve Morris.
Is that right? What's
Yeah.
your
There
we
birthday?
go.
We were very close. I'm October 14th.
And I'm November 21st.
Yeah, because we talked about this at Wrath of Khan when we started to talk about Star Trek. So I remembered we were born very close to each other.
So obviously we were both too young to see it. We were all too
Yes.
young to see it when it first came out.
Right.
But I saw the movie for the first time on the big screen in May of 1980. Now, what very important, special, famous science fiction sequel came out in May of 1980?
It's got to be Empire.
That is correct. The Empire Strikes Back.
Nice.
So I saw The Empire Strikes Back the weekend it opened, and it was at the in the Chamonix Mall, the Premier Theater. It was a 2-screen movie theater. Now they have 14 screens everywhere.
Right.
But it was just a 2-screen theater. So I saw The Empire Strikes Back there. And then about a week later, for some reason, I don't know why, the theater did a special limited opportunity to see 2001. And, being the sci-fi geek that I was and still very much am, I was asked my dad if we could go see it. So my dad says, I don't think you're going to like it.
Oh.
And I was 11 years old, and I said, I will be the judge of that. So
At 11.
he took me to the film. So not only did I not like it, not only did I not understand, not only was I bored to tears, but like you pointed out, there are long moments where nothing really happens. Nobody says anything. There's such dead silence at some points that I could hear from the theater next door the laser blasts and Chewbacca, and at a couple of times I got up to go to the bathroom, quote unquote, and I went in to see where they were with The Empire Strikes Back. It wasn't until, I would say, until high school and VCRs that I was able to really digest 2001 in a proper mindset. Obviously not the proper way to see the movie, but that's when I started to get intrigued by it. And it took really a couple of decades of watching the movie over and over again, as often as I could on the big screen, before I could wrap my head around the film, which is what makes this episode of Cine-Files so special, because I have it. I got it down.
Oh, I can't wait, because I don't think I do. John, do you remember when you first saw it?
Yeah, it was here in Los Angeles for the first time when I had moved here in 2001, and ironically, and it was on TCM, I think. And I remember because I had seen bits, I'd heard the music, people had told me about it, but people had said it is essentially a monolith. It's something to tackle, for lack of a better reference. And so I waited till I was like mentally ready to watch it, and I sat down one night, 10 o'clock at night, dark, lights out. I was living with Edgar at the time, and I just sat and watched this on a 46-inch Sony television off TCM, and I was mesmerized.
You were the first time you saw it.
Yeah, because I think I was old enough to understand that as a film lover, I was old enough to get what was happening in terms of the technique, in terms of the cinematography, in terms of the visuals, and the story he was trying to tell. But I didn't understand it for a very long time. But I loved it because it earns its silences. It earns the moments of which it has dialogue. And one of my greatest fears in life is the achievement of AI. So to see it is AI and the simian uprising. Those are the two things I fear the most in life. And seeing what Hal does in this movie, what he becomes, or he is sentient already, what he decides to do, the helplessness to me is correlative to Jaws. That's what struck me as I was watching the movie. There's no way out of this situation if the computer decides to kill you. And it's like, damn, because it controls everything.
What's interesting is that over the years, like in TV Guide, when I would actually read TV Guide years ago, if they were showing 2001: A Space Odyssey on one of the movie channels or whatever, and the plot line, the synopsis was like a computer kills its astronauts. Like that's not what the movie's about.
Right.
It's funny. It just occurs to me that we've done, because I know one of your other big fears is sharks.
Yeah.
And we've done the Triumvirate, because we've done Jaws.
Yes.
We've done Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
And now we are doing 2001.
Well,
knocking out
2001.
your fears.
Yeah.
2001.
Same year.
And Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, it's 68, right?
Not only did they come out the same year, they came out the same month.
Oh, I didn't know that.
April. So two of the greatest science fiction movies of all time came out in 1968 in the same month.
Wow.
That's crazy. What was your first time?
So I'm going to tell my first time story, but then I have another story to tell as well.
Okay.
So the first time, I think I was about the same age. I saw it on home on TV. So maybe 11 or 12, and went, what is this? And I remember having like, the first part was boring. The space stuff was really cool. The end I didn't understand, but I kept coming back to it, like renting it on VHS until I was in college. And then when I was, Karen and I had first started dating, so this is like 91 or 92. I mentioned on the show before that the UC Theater in Berkeley on University Avenue, that was the classic run theater. That's where I saw they had Kung Fu Thursdays on. That's where I saw the Jackie Chan movies, but they also had double features. And so I said, oh, I'm going to take this new girlfriend of mine to a double feature of 2001: A Space Odyssey and Clockwork Orange.
Oh my God! What? Wow.
Because I'm 22
Yeah,
or something
sure.
like that, and I just thought I love movies, so I love this new girl, and so she'd never seen a Kubrick film as far as I know.
God.
We get to the we get between 2001 is over. I don't think she was ready to break up with me, but she was so angry that I had taken her to that movie. She had been so bored. And then, and a real sign this must have been very early in our relationship, she still went in to go watch Clockwork Orange.
Oh, wow.
And it was funny because now I'm watching Clockwork Orange going, oh, this is worse.
It's so different.
Well, and it's violent and horrible and, one that I would like to do on the Cine-Files, but is going to be a lot to deal with. We walked out of Clockwork Orange, which she loved.
Whoa.
She loved Clockwork Orange.
There you go.
So, head out to 30 years later almost. And last week, Karen and I sat down and she watched 2001 for the second time and really liked it.
What is it about the film that you were curious enough to like it enough the first time you saw it? I thought it was boring. You didn't. You and I are sort of on the same page with how we saw it the first time. But rather than just find it boring and just dismiss it, what was it about this film that even if you don't entirely like it or entirely get it, the first couple of times you see it, you keep coming back to it? It's like it casts a spell. There is a magic there. There's just some like euphoria that it stays with you, where it wakens your curiosity, where you want to see it again. You want to figure it out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen other films that I didn't like, and if I never see them again, like the new Solo movie. Sorry, I hate
Mini
it.
review.
There you go. There's the review. But 2001 is like, wait, I got to watch this again. And I watch it again and again. I must have seen it like 75 times.
Well, I have two thoughts about this. The first thought is most of the movies that we never want to see again are because they're bad. And I don't think you can say watching 2001, even not liking it, that it's bad. Because it is obviously so masterful in the way that it's shot and the special effects. You can't look at this and go, there's no craftsmanship here. That's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I would say is I think of all the films that we've done on the Cine-Files, and I would say if you look at any of your top 100 lists, 2001 is the strangest movie that's on any of these lists. Is the only experimental film we've ever done. And I think this goes into the realm of this is an experimental film. And so and because of that high level of craftsmanship and because of the genius of Kubrick and because of its experimental nature, I think it draws you to go, wait a minute, I think I have to try this again.
And that craftsmanship is astounding.
Yeah.
It's 50 years old, and it looks like it could have been made today.
Yeah. One of our friends, JT, tweeted it that he went to go see it, and he said it's ahead of its time. I said it's still ahead of its time, even now. Even now in 2018, it's the great. To me, in my opinion, it is the greatest sci-fi movie ever made, with Blade Runner coming second, and it is the best Kubrick movie ever made.
I agree.
Period, because it is his most, in my opinion, it is his most realized, intelligent love of cinema, and he fucks with you as the audience in so many incredible ways that you have to come to it. And that's what you mentioned earlier, Steve. What is it that brings us back? You asked this question. What is it that brings us back? It is that. It is that Kubrick does not lay it out for you and spoon feed you or take your hand and hold you through it, but he does so much with the magic of cinema to make you come back to it like a moth to a flame. He turns the film. We are the apes in the film when the monolith shows up. 2001 is the monolith for us as filmgoers, being the apes
great.
in the
I
filmgoers.
like that a lot.
That's what I think it is. It's he took film and that thing is like the advancement. It's evolution. 2001 is evolution to me.
It's absolutely what it is. It's evolution.
It's one of the key themes.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about pre-production. So this is after Dr. Strangelove, which is another film we've done on the Cine-Files. So if you want to find out about that, go back and listen to our Strangelove episode.
Good plug.
And this is at this when he starts in 1963. It takes a while for this movie to get made. At that point, we're kind of behind in the space race.
That's right. The Russians were ahead.
Yeah, the Russians
Project
are
Mercury,
ahead.
yeah.
And he reaches out to Arthur C. Clarke to develop something together. And Arthur C. Clarke, he is one of those original, we talked about the ABC of science fiction writers, and he is the C. And he started in the mid 30s. And he, I think it's 1938, he started writing for fanzines. And this is, the world of science fiction is just really different from what it was then. It was this weird niche.
Yeah, there was, so, but the magazines, the pulp magazines.
The pulp magazines. And he actually loved real science. In fact, some people say that he actually came up with the idea of satellites in geosynchronous orbits and using them for communications. Wow. And he wrote early nonfiction essays about how you would go about doing this and how it could allow us to communicate all around the world. And it seems like, and from the small amount of research I did, that he might not have come up with, he probably did come up with the idea on his own, but a bunch of other people came up with that same idea kind of simultaneously. Right. But he really, it was deeply involved in it. And that led him to have a really close relationship with NASA, with early NASA. And so when Kubrick comes to him, this is one of the big reasons, is because this guy is actually hooked up into real science. And one of the things, and you'll see this throughout the film, is as mystical and abstract as a movie as this is, it is also hard science fiction. It is really about a real love of real science and real space travel. And Arthur C. Clarke offers him, hey, here are some early short stories of mine that I think would be cool for this thing. And the one that Kubrick read that he really liked is called The Sentinel. Yeah. And that is what this is based on. And they come up with the weirdest deal I've ever heard of in film, which is we're going to write the screenplay together and we're going to write the novel at the same time. And the screenplay is going to be written by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. And the novel is going to be written by Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. It doesn't come out that way. It comes out as Arthur C. Clarke only on the novel because Kubrick didn't really like the novel.
From what I understand, Kubrick kind of messed around with Clarke by like saying he was going to do certain things in the movie and not doing them, and Clarke did other scenes, and so he purposefully misled Clarke through this process so that his movie would stand alone from the novel, which is not beyond the realm of possibility for the arrogance of Kubrick, and for lack of a better term, is genius. He did the same thing to a degree with The Shining. He took that, he said, I don't care what Stephen King wrote, I'm going to make my movie. And so he has this desire to be in charge of it or to own what he does.
Well, after the success of Spartacus, which was the only movie that Kubrick ever did as a for-hire director, and it was a very unpleasant experience for him, and he said he would never again direct another movie that he did not also produce. So, but it was still a very successful film, and so was Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. So, very confident with that. Talking with Clarke, he set out, like he said, I want to make the greatest science fiction movie ever. Like that was his plan from the beginning. And the beginning stages, the movie was going to be called How the Solar System Was Won. There was another because they were going off How the West was won. The other working title for 2001 was Journey Beyond the Stars.
That's right.
But 2001: A Space Odyssey, even though we are now way past that year, and in a very bitter sense of irony, that year is now infamous because of a real life incident. Then I just always felt like that really sucks.
Yeah.
That this movie that just signaled the future is now associated with 9/11.
Right.
But I remember that year I did see it on December 31st, 2001, which is like the day to see it. Yeah, that was cool.
That's cool.
But anyway, so it's a very interesting collaboration that Kubrick had with Clarke. I mean, they really worked very, very well together. There was no like irreconcilable differences in creative differences, rather.
Right. Yeah. And one other influence I just find that's interesting is that's important for this film is the 1964 World's Fair in New York. And it's so interesting. There are a couple of World's Fairs, the 39 World Fair, the Chicago World's Fair, where really important stuff happened, and New York is one of them. And one of the things, and Kubrick went there, and one of the people he found there was a bunch of the people who became the special effects folks on this movie. Wow. The most important being Douglas Trumbull. And he goes on to be special effects for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which we already talked about.
Blade Runner, which we already talked about.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the most important special effects people, and Kubrick found him at the World's Fair. Also, by the way, at the World's Fair is where great moment. Disney had a whole bunch of stuff. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln premiered there. The People Movers, and of course, It's a Small World was at that 1964
Wow.
World's Fair. Yeah. Would you like to step into the movie?
Let's step into the movie with what we hear, not what we see. That overture is called Atmospheres. And we hear Atmospheres three times throughout the course of the film. Hear it during the overture, and then the return after the intermission, the entr'acte.
Sure.
And then again during the Stargate scene when Bowman is going through the wormhole.
What's funny is when I first saw the movie, most of the times there was no overture. And there was no intermission because on the VHS tape, I don't think that stuff was there.
That's true.
It didn't get added until the DVD.
Right.
And so I didn't know that existed.
But that sets the mood. That
Absolutely.
score, that just even when I sat down to watch it again, just recently, watching it on the big screen, and you hear that music, like I got the freaking chills, and it just immediately sets the tone. Yeah. What it sort of says to you is, it clears your head of everything that you've experienced that day, whatever might be on your mind. It eases you into the mindset that you need to be in to absorb every moment of that film. That is what that overture does.
Well, and there's something I feel that we should say as we ease into 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I know there's some people that watch the movie and then listen to our podcast, and there are other people who listen to us and then decide to watch the movie. And what I feel that I must tell you is that you got to settle in, folks.
Yeah.
This movie is unlike anything else. The pace of it, particularly by 2018 standards, is ridiculously slow. Yeah. And you got to accept it. You can't fight it. Don't battle against it.
Yeah.
Patience.
Settle in.
Absolutely. Just let the film absorb you. Let it consume you. Let it envelop you, and you will be rewarded because it is a movie that will stay with you forever.
Yeah. And of course, one thing that'll stay with you forever is the music and the sunrise at the very opening of the film. Thus spoke Zarathustra.
Yeah.
Richard Strauss. This is some of the most iconic movie in film history.
One of the greatest openings. Just that score, that da da da. By that time, the first time I'd seen the film, I'd heard that music elsewhere.
Right.
On commercials.
Right.
Like when they're making fun of other things. So to hear that music in the way that it was intended to be heard in a cinematic landscape like 2001, I went, oh, okay, now I get it. But the symmetry of the planets, of the sun and the moon and the earth, and just the way, there's a lot of symmetry throughout the course of this movie, by the way. But just that the building of the score and the thumping of the drum, dum. It's just, again, it is another right after the overture, which is chilling, and then you have that score. It just also chilling in a more rousing way.
And what's interesting, by the way, so the piece of music, Thus Spoke the Zarathustra, I'm always going to stumble over that word, is that title comes from Nietzsche, that's one of his books. And so Nietzsche, and we'll get into this maybe a little later, one of the interpretations of 2001: A Space Odyssey has a lot to do with Mr. Nietzsche. So we'll come back to that a little later. After this just unbelievably dramatic visual opening, we go to the dawn
of man.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing about the dawn of man. Throughout the course of the film, it is divided into chapters.
Right. 4 chapters.
But the dawn of man is not just the part of the film with the apes. The dawn of man is the entire movie.
Oh, because there's no title. You're right. There's no
Exactly.
subtitle.
The dawn of man encompasses the man apes that we see 4 million years ago, and it goes all the way up till the point where Dave Bowman turns into the Star Child.
Yeah.
That entire 4 million year period where we are right now We are the dawn of man. And it took decades for me to realize that, wait a minute, the dawn of man, it's not just the apes, it's everything. We are the dawn of man right now.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that is what this movie is. And in fact, I think the pace of the film, the slow pace, it kind of forces you to be contemplative. You're not, because there's not so much happening that you're not struggling to keep up with the story. You're kind of going, okay, I'm looking at this thing. And what you're looking at are these gorgeous shots of these, first of just, kind of the savannah, this ancient world, and which, by the way, those are all still photography. I didn't realize.
Yeah, it's rear projected.
Yep. Is that and Kubrick, who was deathly afraid of flying, didn't fly to Africa to go shoot this stuff. He had still photographers, and this is what's so bizarre to me. And this is like a perfect Kubrick story, as far as I'm concerned, is that he's on the phone with them. And he has divided up what the shot should be on like graph paper. And he can't see what they're shooting because that technology doesn't exist.
Right.
So he's saying, no, put that rock, that should be at A5 coordinate on the graph paper, and frame it. So he is describing without seeing what they should shoot based on this having coordinates on a graph. That is
astounding. It is that mindset that makes 2001 such a meticulous film that, like you said, even by today's standards, is still ahead of its time. So what is going on with the man-apes in the Dawn of Man sequence?
In what way? I mean, like, they're herbivores. They're not fighting with anybody. They're getting along with the animals.
Right.
And then eventually they find the tool, which is the bone.
But before you get to that point, man, ape, let's call them apes they are dying. They are starving. They are vegetarians. They're eating berries, and they've got these walking masses of protein right in front of them.
Yeah.
But they are dying, and they are being killed off by starvation, by other predators, like that tiger that attacks the one ape.
Yeah.
They are humanity of 4 million years ago is an endangered species.
Well, and they're in conflict with another group of apes that is, staked out this water hole.
That's right.
And there's a moment of, them sort of posturing with each other, and we back down. And we should say, by the way, that these are dancers and mostly mimes. And it's so interesting because, by the way, when I was a kid, it never occurred to me. I didn't occur to me they were people in suits,
right?
Because they just looked so convincing to me when I was a kid. And the main guy, by the way, is
Daniel Richter.
Daniel Richter, yeah.
He's a moon watcher.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's his in the credits. The lead ape is called Moon Watcher. Now at this point, after we've established that humanity is dying, that the apes are dying, and it's only a matter of time, they are sleeping in a corner of a mountain, of a rock structure, and if you look at their faces, they are terrified. They are terrified. You can hear the tiger growling off camera, and they are not, settling in. They are just like terrified. And then the next scene focuses on the Moon Watcher, and the lighting is on him as we start to hear the music of Requiem.
Is that the name of that's the name of the track?
That's the name of the track.
It's heavy drone, dissonant. Yeah.
And it is just like Atmospheres. It is a mood-setting piece that heralds the first time we see the monolith. And the way that scene is structured, with Moon Watcher freaking out, waking up the other apes, and then the camera pans like it's a full screen shot, and there amidst the apes and the rocks and is this perfectly symmetrical thing, this monolith with its ratio of 1:4:9, and it looks completely out of place with this Dawn of Man sequence. And the apes are going crazy, and they're losing their minds, and they're jumping around like crazy until Moon Watcher, before the others, gets the courage to go up to the monolith and slowly start to caress it, feel it up and down. And then the other apes start to do the same. And where they went from being like totally nuts, the monolith has a soothing effect on them. I wonder how many times they shot that scene until Kubrick was like, okay, you got it. Because I'm sure it wasn't 3 takes.
No. Well, first of all, and again, this is something that came up in Lawrence of Arabia, is that we kept saying over and over again, this shot is gorgeous. This shot is amazing. This shot is beautiful. The same is true here. Every single shot. It will be redundant to say it, but this one in particular, where there's something in the foreground, there's midground, there's background, the way everything is framed, the way the bodies are approaching it and slowly touching the monolith, just the design of the monolith, everything about it is gorgeous. And yes, I'm certain. And by the way, the backgrounds, this is all shot on a soundstage, and those backgrounds are just those still photographs from shot in Africa.
Right.
So convincing.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and they're doing it with front projection. With apparently there was no projector bright enough to do what Kubrick wanted, so they had to invent a new one. Naturally,
No problem.
Yeah, right.
and there's even like there's this shot where there's this like leopard with glowing eyes, and that was just a happy accident from the brightness of that front projector. That's what made his eyes glow. But anyway, getting to this moment, so we have a monolith.
Yeah.
The solution of what is the monolith, or the answering that question, is something that we can, think about forever.
Yeah. I'm doing research for the podcast. Some people claim that the monolith is the reason evolution begins. Some people claim that the monolith is the savior. There's numerous ways that you can look at the monolith, but to me, I always thought that it was symbolic of man's always being out of place with its own technology, like being out of step with its own technology. Whatever it creates or walks into, it cannot handle. It can create it. It cannot handle it. And that struck me.
The significance of the monolith. What we see happen twice is the monolith planting the seed to advance humanity, to evolve humanity. It happens 4 million years ago, and it happens again in 2001. And the reason for the 4 million year gap in the advancement of the evolution is, I'll explain it as we get closer to the moon sequence. But I'm going with you, and I've always felt that the purpose of the monolith, it is artificial intelligence. It's extraterrestrial intelligence,
Right?
And it is that our evolution, our advancement as a species, was advanced with the help of life outside the Earth.
Right.
So the monolith is there 4 million years ago. It has this night with the apes, and then it disappears. It disappears, and it is buried on the moon, where it will not be dug up for another 4 million years. Yeah. But what it left behind in the very next scene changed the course of humanity, because humanity was able to survive, but at what price?
Right.
At what price? Because like you pointed out, John, everybody was getting along,
Yeah.
but they were dying.
Yep.
But now, Moonwatcher has this epiphany. For the first time in the history of humanity up to that point, humanity had an epiphany. Moonwatcher had this moment where he realized that this heavy bone could be used as a weapon. And again, we hear...
Thus spoke Zarathustra.
Right.
And nothing is sort of in this movie. It brings Moonwatcher this idea that it could be used as a weapon. The way he slowly starts to move the bone around, and he sees it smashing the skull of the other animals in the area, and just this, it awakens him. Mm-hmm. It's a rousing moment.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, it's dinner time.
Well, I want to go back for two things. The first thing is there is a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which I think, even though I think this is Kubrick's movie, not Clarke's,
right.
But this quote I think is so key to the ideas of this film. And the quote is, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." I think that is that, and what's one of the
That's
interesting,
fantastic.
yeah, it's a great, and you think about it, it's true. Is that if you're, in the Roman Empire and someone shows up with an iPhone,
Yeah.
that's magic. Like that you can't conceive of what that is. And one of the interesting changes that Kubrick made from the Sentinel to this is apparently which I've never read, but apparently in the Sentinel, the thing they find, it's all about some weird little machine that's buried in a cave, and that it sounds like, kind of a floating computer kind of thing.
Right.
And Kubrick went, no. We need to have something that we can't understand. Is that for what the apes and the dawn of man discover, it is magic. But Kubrick was like, no, this has to seem like magic to us. Right. And that monolith is magic. It is technology so far beyond anything we can understand that we can't know what that thing is.
And that keeps getting repeated throughout the film.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's interesting. I do want to say one final point, one point about the sequence.
It's not a final point.
Right.
We got a long way to go.
Started.
Interesting about, but what you brought up, Steve, earlier, the mentioning of Chris Nolan. It strikes me now that the score that comes on for the Monolith is very similar to the opening score of The Dark Knight when the Joker is there.
You're right.
That dissonance.
You're totally right.
That
it is
dissonance.
100%.
Right? And then maybe that's his homage to Kubrick. Because when the whole beginning is like that, going the undercurrent going through the whole, so maybe that is his little homage. And it was perfect because it's as unsettling when we see the monolith in the movie for the first time, because you hear that little grumbling, that grumbling underneath. When you see the Joker, when you hear that, it is just as unsettling because he is about to change everything, just like the monolith
That's
did.
a great point.
Well, and I want to go just because this moment is so important. We have to talk about this moment with the bones. Is that he's sitting there, Moonwatcher is sitting there, and he looks at the bones in front of him, and there's this moment where his head tilts.
Right.
And that head tilt is you can see a thought.
Right. And also, while he is tilting his head, there is that flash
of the monolith. So important.
Yes.
Is that okay, this thing has something to do with the key moments in human evolution. Something to do with it.
And that is why the only other time the monolith did that was in 2001, which is why everything from that moment in the beginning to 2001, this is all the dawn of man, all of it. I'm going to convince you of this before the end of the show.
I don't think I'm going to argue with it. I think I'm good with that. And this is one of the interesting things. There's a lot of people with a lot of theories about, quote unquote, what separates humans from animals. And there's all sorts of theories about it. Oh, it's language, it's tool making, which is sort of what we're seeing here. It's a social structure. It's the development of the frontal cortex in the brain. It's consciousness, which is definitely something that this film is about, is what is the nature of consciousness. But the one of the things with the development of the frontal lobe of the brain is the idea to think in abstracts. So to think in the future, to think in the past, and to think about something that could become something else. And that head tilt moment, that is that moment, where he looks at this bone, which had no meaning whatsoever, and starts to go, wait, there could be a meaning. And that as the music builds, there's this low angle shot of him in the moment of discovery where he lifts that bone up and starts beating it. And it's
like it's an aha moment.
It is joyful and violent and scary. So yeah, and then later on they're eating meat. It's interesting, by the way, the animals still aren't scared of them.
Right.
So they haven't been killing them long enough for the animals to go, oh, we got to
get out of here.
Yeah, we got to get the hell out of here. And we can see the babies are eating meat, and the babies, I think, are actually monkeys.
Yeah, they are.
And now suddenly we're back into conflict with this other troop.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a major difference. Now, the tribe, the Moonwatcher tribe, not only are they armed with weapons, they are standing upright.
Yep.
And the other gang has no idea. They're just like ready to fight for their territory.
Right.
Well, they intimidated him before.
Right. And one of the apes charges Moonwatcher and boom, right over the head. And all the other apes join in and start smashing the ape over the head with their bones. And one of them smashes it so hard that the bone breaks.
Yeah.
And the defenders are so horrified by what they've seen that they back off.
So I want to ask, before we get to the next cut, which is obviously one of the key moments in film history, how do you feel at this moment?
Okay, that's a great question. How do you feel, John?
That was the best buck pass I've ever seen.
I didn't know you were throwing me the ball. Here, I'm going to go to layup. No, for me, the symbolism of it is inescapable, right? The idea that once we develop weapons, we will use them to intimidate other human beings, even though they are essentially members of our tribe, our species, to defend or to take territory and to maintain security of our people, right? So you in essence, it's a microcosm of what we will eventually be doing as we draw lines in the sand separating one country and the border from another, even though we're on the same fucking landmass.
I found that, I still find that scene to be disturbing.
Yeah.
I think it's really disturbing.
Of course it
It
is,
is a
because it shows you
disturbing
man
scene,
in its
like-
naked truth.
But it's like, what choice?
Human.
It was either evolve or die.
Well, that's the question, right? The monolith, you said this earlier, the monolith sparks the evolution, but at what cost?
Cost. So, and that
Why do we
cost,
survive? Yeah.
And so after the other apes have vacated the premises.
Well, and let me just say, too, is that we had a moment of joyfulness when he discovered the bow.
Sure.
And the use of the tool. And now we have the flip side of that same thing.
ape is killing ape.
And I think one of the themes of this film is the multi-dimensional costs of technology. Is that on the one hand,
Yes.
it allows you to do all this stuff, like get some more food. And on the other hand, the possession of the technology separates us and creates opportunities for violence and distrust. And
Look what's happening now. We've never been more connected to each other as a species, yet more divided than ever.
And that's
Because of social media, because of technology, because of our access to each other. We now know each other's innermost thoughts at every second if we want to.
Yeah.
And that allows us to judge, separate, divide, destroy, attack, also love, connect, help, but there's always the negative side to it.
So, you're watching that scene and you're watching the apes bash the other apes with the bones and the weapons. And just watching it again recently, I just went like, I wasn't like, I was like, like a loss of, it's almost like a loss of innocence. in
yes,
some ways.
I think that's exactly it.
That's a perfect
That's how
point.
it feels.
And that loss of innocence. So we see Moonwatcher with the other apes behind him. Moonwatcher is standing, his most upright. He's, growling in victory. And he walks out of the shot. And then the next shot is the shot.
Yep.
The shot of Moonwatcher, not just throwing the bone in the air, but winding up.
Yep.
He winds up to throw the bone in the air, screaming. Why? Why is he screaming? Why does he throw the bone in the air? Does he throw it in the air out of triumph? Or does he throw it in the air out of what have I done?
Shame.
So as a young man, it was obvious to me that it's triumph. Wow. And when I watched this last time, it absolutely looked like, oh God, what have I done?
What have I done?
Wow.
What have we
What have we wrought?
What did we do? What the shock of it just.
Well, if you look,
what
if
did
you,
we do?
If you look at the battle, when he hits that other ape and that ape goes down, he is shocked.
Yes.
Because I don't think he expected it to just like wipe him out like that.
Yeah.
There is a fear along with that triumph.
If that can happen to him or it can happen to me.
Right.
If we allow it to, or they get their hands on bones.
For the longest time. For the longest
I have
time.
never thought it was shame.
I thought it was triumph. For the longest time,
That is
I thought it
incredible.
was triumph. That we got it back and we're dominant, But in more recent years, I looked at it as
Fascinating.
as humanity became more aware, like it did at that moment, just the shame and the shock that they weren't killing other animals now for food, that they were
Right.
killing their own people.
Yeah.
And in the greatest cut transition, I mean, it is the greatest transition in movie history. The bone in midair, falling back to Earth, and that quick cut to the spy satellite.
Yeah.
Yep.
because that's what that is. From one weapon to another. 4 million years, one weapon to another.
Which for years, by the way, I didn't know that it was. I was only doing research this time that I found out that it's some kind of weapon platform spy satellite thing. It's funny. As an editor, one of the weirdest things to me about that cut is, in my mind, logically, you would make the cut on the upward path. But he waits until the bone is coming down.
Right.
And I this is just because as an editor, I go, why did he make that choice?
Why?
And it's, of course, the right choice. I don't know why.
Really?
It's,
Okay.
Yeah, why did he wait? Like he...
So I will answer this, and then I will go back one last thing before we jump into this next section of the film.
Yes.
The reason I think he goes down is because it is the fall of man. It's the symbol of man, falling of man. That's what I've always felt. That it goes down because as great as the tool is, the exaltation, it always will fall back down to earth, which is the end of joy. And so
I like it. Sure.
for me, this whole beginning sequence is also very correlative to religion. God is in the Garden of Eden. God is the monolith. He discovers the tool when God appears. I'm naked. I'm now aware that I'm naked.
So wait, is God the monolith, or is the monolith the apple of the tree of knowledge?
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. God put it there is what I'm saying.
Sure.
God put the monolith there. God is the apple. Because we don't know that they're aliens until what's-his-face says that Justice Hal is dying. We have no idea there's extraterrestrial stuff necessarily until this recording way later in the film.
And honestly,
so,
we don't know anything.
Right,
because, like, what does that guy know?
Right, exactly. Exactly. Is he telling that's his limited knowledge? So anyway, I find correlative here because that is Adam or Cain killing Abel in essence when the ape kills the other ape.
So
Correct.
That's a thing in my mind. And so what have I done? I've killed my own brother. In essence, it's all, to me, it's correlative. It has symbolism within it about religion, also about the dawn of civilization and what have you. And yes, what have we become? Being in the Catholic religion, obviously driven out of the Garden of Eden. But I think that's always been a wrong way to interpret it, because it is God giving us knowledge. It is what we do with that knowledge that is either great or terrible. And so now we can, if we want, jump
By
into
the way,
next.
God didn't want us to have that knowledge.
I don't know what he wanted. I don't know God.
He clearly said he didn't want you to have that
Yeah,
knowledge.
right. It's in the
It
Bible.
was very clear on these instructions.
Anyway.
One small interesting thing, by the way, is that nuclear satellite or whatever it is, that was a whole other plot that Kubrick had. There was going to be like a nuclear war in this movie, and then he decided it's too close to Strangelove, and so they didn't do it. Which,
Oh, is that right?
yeah,
I think it would have been heavy-handed.
So they waited till 2010 to throw that one in there.
you know, I saw 2010 when it came out.
Yep.
I literally have no memory of it at all.
Really?
I actually, you know what? It is a good movie on its own terms.
Yes.
No,
It's
memory of
not
it.
2001.
Nowhere near 2001.
It's, I mean, it was directed by the guy who directed Capricorn 1, Peter Hyams.
Who I love.
But that's a great movie.
He
by
did
the way.
Running Scared
Running
with
Scared.
Billy
Yeah,
Crystal
yeah,
and
yeah.
Gregory Hines, which I love.
But 2010 stands on its own terms. It's a very good movie. Okay, we'll talk about that some other time.
So we're in space,
We're in
Yeah.
space.
and we hear the beautiful sound of the
Blue Danube, Johann Strauss.
Johann Strauss. The two Strausses, are they related? I don't know. I should have checked.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Are they?
I didn't realize he uses Blue Danube in Paths of Glory, which I had totally forgotten in the ballroom scene. I love Paths of Glory, by the way.
I would love to do that with
I
you,
want to
Steve.
do it. It's
Let's do it.
a really good movie. And this is where I don't think there's any movie like this. Like the attention to detail, the scientific attention to detail, the complexity and the difficulty of the shots, and the total lack of plot or character or anything that's happening for the next really long time as you watch a spaceship, Pan Am's regular flight to the space station, dock at the space station. It is remarkable.
The attention to detail with the models, with the rear projection of the people in the windows. You know, this was not CGI. This was absolutely everything about this movie was practical. Everything about it, and it still holds up. It still looks terrific.
Amazing.
And just the way the movie is so grounded in reality, just in the way that the spacecraft has to line up perfectly with the turning space station,
Everything about it. I mean, like we come in and we're in this what looks like a plane.
Yeah.
You know, so he's building on what the technology was at the time, and you can see Kubrick, and he has a real science advisor, which hadn't really happened in this way before, thinking about what would a plane be like that flies to space.
Yeah.
You know, there had been no space shuttle yet. None of this exists, and we see a guy sleeping. And we see floating next to him a pen floating through space. And in walks a stewardess, and she's walking in this very strange way.
Yeah.
Because, of course, there's no gravity.
On gravity boots.
Yeah.
You got the Velcro.
Like Velcro. And I love, by the way, how they did the floating pen.
Yeah, they put on a glass.
Yeah, glass
And the-
sheet.
yeah.
That people are just moving around this glass sheet, and she pulls and it's stuck to the sheet, and she just unsticks it.
Yeah.
But it is totally convincing.
Yeah, you can't see it unless you're really, really, really looking for it,
Yeah.
which you can't see it in
Right.
70 millimeter, trust me. But you have to really, really look for it.
And as you said, watching the docking in space, of watching the rotation and them lining up every single shot and slow, showing the POV of the pilots and showing the control room and showing all these things of how they do it. And to me, it was funny. I just was thinking about, I mean, this took huge amounts of time to pull this off. And I was thinking about the kinds of shots that we spend huge amount of time on special effects shots today. And usually the purpose of them is to make you go, wow, that was a really cool shot.
Yeah.
Like that's their purpose. And what Kubrick is doing is making you go, wow, that's fascinating technology. Space travel is amazing.
Yeah.
It's not like the thrill of watching a comic book movie or a sci-fi movie today. And it's not even cinematic thrill as much. I really think this is so cool.
Yeah.
And so, but these special effects shots that we're seeing, special effects supervisor Douglas Trumbull, who we've already mentioned,
He's the man.
and did not get the credit on the end credits of the movie, sadly.
Because Kubrick got it. Yeah.
Kubrick took it for himself, and that was the only Oscar this movie got, by the way. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards for director, screenplay, and set decoration, and it won one for best visual effects, and that went to Kubrick.
Which, by the way, he did do a lot. I think it kind of should have been both of them.
Maybe we weren't allowed to at the time, but who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
So
we're inside the space station.
inside the space station, and Dr. Haywood Floyd, played by actor William Sylvester, who's going to Clavius Base to investigate the cover-up that's being done.
Well, this is what's we spend so much time in the, it's like he rotates in this weird room.
Yeah.
He checks in. He gets met by this guy. He goes through some security stuff.
Yep.
We hear his name. He walks down this curved floor with red chairs. And of course, the reason that the floor is curved is because it's the exterior wall of the rotating space station.
Right.
Because that's where gravity comes from. Gravity comes from rotation. And that's something we're going to see throughout the film. And the first thing, he splits up with the guy he's with, says, I'll meet you at the meeting, because he's going to make a video call home.
he Skypes.
He Skypes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is another thing that came from the 1964 World's Fair, because there, Bell Labs demonstrated the first video phone call.
Oh, wow.
They were also doing that on Star Trek, by the way. But
Yeah. Well, that's
not cross the streams here.
well, except that's next year. Because this was
Yeah.
shot in 65. Star Trek premieres in 66.
Correct.
So even though this movie doesn't come out till 68.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so funny, because this is like the golden age of science fiction right here. Star Trek
Absolutely.
and,
Star
and
Trek.
2001 happening right next to each
Planet
other.
of the Apes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
Sound of music.
Yeah, totally.
Total sci-fi.
well, that movie's not very accurate, so maybe it is. Guys.
No, that's not really what happened to the Von Trapps.
It's not. I looked it up one time. It is not even close. Not remotely what happened
It is
to the
pure
Von Trapp.
fiction.
Pure fiction. But we digress.
Yes.
The as he's walking through, he walks through the Howard Johnsons, because of course there's a Howard Johnson's on the space
Those are
station.
Hojos.
Hilton, too.
That's right, Hilton.
And there he runs into some other scientists,
Russian scientists.
Russian scientists.
And, so far, like, all of the dialogue we've seen is all pleasantries.
Right.
Like, hey, Dr. Floyd, great to have you back. Oh, yeah, just go through this. And, I'm going to call my daughter. Hey, Squirt, how you doing? Oh, my, mom's not home, whatever. And then more pleasantries when he meets the Russian scientists.
Yeah.
But now the pleasantries go away when one of them asks what's going on at Clavius.
Dr. Floyd, I hope you don't think I'm being too inquisitive, but perhaps you can clear up the great big mystery about what has been going on up there.
afraid I don't know what you mean.
And it's interesting because they're still speaking in a very pleasant way.
Oh, yes.
But there's obvious, I mean, this is as underplayed as you can be. And he goes, oh, what do you mean? And it's like, well, they haven't taken phone calls for 10 days. There was an emergency landing they sent away that's breaking on the rules. And finally, what does Haywood say?
I'm not at liberty to discuss it.
I'm not at liberty to discuss it.
Right.
And this is a really low level of, wait, what's going on here? I mean, it's handled so unimportantly. It's really fascinating.
It's handled so unimportantly. And in the end, it's a moment of tension that has nothing to do with the scope of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing that really is said or spoken about really has nothing to do with the grandness of the whole thing.
Right.
That's it. It's about the grand. It's about the scope. It's about the grandness. This thing about oh, it's about a killed computer, and it's what's going on at the moon. It's like it is an absolute situation where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
It's also correlative in that here are the two tribes again.
Sure.
The Russians and the Americans. There's like the two tribes in Dawn of Man. That seems right. It's the Russians and the Americans. He is Moon, whatever you said his name
Watcher.
is. Yeah, Moon Watcher. He's Moon Watcher. Floyd is
More
Moon
ways
Watcher.
than one.
Right. And if you notice the Russian,
Wow, I like this point. This is great.
yeah, if you notice the Russian, as he's moving his finger, he's flicking him off. He's using the middle finger when he's doing it like this. And it's a subtle flick off.
I never saw that.
Never noticed that.
So like when little things like that are happening, I only notice this because I am a very impish person and can do that sometimes myself. So when I see it in a film, it's very obvious to me. But like, yeah, so it's to me that's what is going on here is the pleasantries are essentially disguising what's really obviously going on, which is the difference in the two tribes.
I'm so excited by this point because I think it's so great because the through line of what is the monolith and what's really happening and what is the evolution of man or the dawn of man is that there's several things going on. One is the advancement of technology, and the bone is the advancement of technology in the first. And obviously space travel is the advancement of technology because we can't get to the moon unless we've advanced enough to get to the moon. But then the other thing going on is the evolution of violence, of how and the use of technology is a wedge between us and other groups. And that's clearly what's going on in this very civil way.
So in the Dawn of Man sequence, the two tribes of apes were the superpowers. Yeah. And here you advance 4 million years, and still there are two superpowers that can't get along.
Right.
Well,
so what has all this evolution and technology brought us? Nothing.
Well, which is why your point makes so much sense. The entire movie is the Dawn of Man because we still have not moved past.
No, I don't think I ever argued with it. And the bone, by the way, is the weapon of mass destruction at the beginning, and now nuclear power and space travel and artificial intelligence is going to be the next weapon of mass destruction.
Right.
All right. But he can't talk to the Russians because he's got to go off to the moon.
So we're back. Now we're on another spacecraft. That is, and we're back with the Blue Danube.
Yep.
And again, a very long sequence as the spacecraft approaches the moon, and this scene in particular gave a lot of conspiracy theorists a lot of ammunition when it came to the theory that Stanley Kubrick filmed the Apollo 11 moon landing. But what about Apollo 12 and Apollo 14, 15, 16, and 17? He didn't do those.
And he didn't do.
They got someone
2010.
He didn't do Apollo 13 because Ron Howard did that one.
Boom.
And by the way, if you want to hear us talk more about this, on our episode on The Shining, we talked about the documentary Room 237 where they get
a great.
yes, this is definitely where those conspiracy theories come from. The science stuff on this trip to the moon is just amazing.
Yeah,
we see her with the trays of food. Floyd is once again asleep. The stewardesses.
Wait. Can we talk for a second? Don't you think it's weird that she's watching a jujitsu? I'm surprised you didn't bring this. Is this later on? The stewardess is watching a jujitsu video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it weird?
It's weird.
Why is she watching jujitsu?
It is weird.
I don't know.
What are we dealing with here?
I have no idea.
Does she have unruly passengers on these flights? Like, I want to know why she's watching jujitsu. I mean, I get it because it was new.
By the way, I bet
martial
money it
arts.
was judo, not jiu-jitsu.
Oh, was it judo? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
But either way, it's martial arts, and I think because
absolutely.
also martial arts was becoming big in in the world in the 60s too, 60s, 70s. So that wouldn't be surprising to me to have that thrown in there. But the Velcro things are really interesting too. It's like, once again, it's like this idea, like we can create this technology, but we are kind of, it's almost like Wall-E. Like we are so stuck on the spaceship for so long, we have to make these adjustments. Like we have to learn how to go to the bathroom. Like there's instructions on how to go to the toilet.
I think that's
ridiculous.
That is literally the funniest moment in the movie.
Yeah, it is. If you go to IMDb,
instructions are so extensive.
If you go to IMDb, and the 2001: A Space Odyssey page, go to the trivia portion.
Okay.
And they actually have all of that written out. They are actual instructions for using a zero-G toilet.
Which, by the way, is a complicated and difficult thing. And I want to say, too, so there's this moment, the stewardess is, she's on with the Velcro shoes, and she walks into sort of what looks like a cylinder, and then she walks up the round sides of the wall until she's completely upside down, and then walks away upside down. And this is a technology that's going to be used multiple times throughout the film, and what it is the whole set is on a gimbal, which means you can flip the whole set around. And sometimes what we will have is the camera attached to the set. So the camera is also rotating. Sometimes the camera not attached to the set. In this case, the camera is attached to the set. So what she's doing, she's really walking in place as the entire set is spinning around her until it's upside down, and the camera is spinning with the set. So the camera is now on the ceiling, essentially filming her upside down, and then she can walk out of the room.
Amazing. It's so cool to watch, even today. I like it. So take your time. There's no rush. I'm happy to watch that scene. It's fun. It's fun seeing that, because you're like, there's the little kid inside of you just goes, how did they do that? So I mean, they really filmed the hell out of that scene with showing the spacecraft not only land on the moon, but then it sort of descends into the moon base, Clavius Base.
And when it descends, there's an art term which is ambiguous space, which is that you look into a space and you don't know really what you're looking at. And what happens is, first the space capsule is going to land, and the sort of round spiraling teeth of the space station open up on the moon. And then we're in this shot in this kind of red space, and you go like, I don't really know what this is. And then slowly you see this space capsule descend through it. And your brain kind of locks in and goes, oh, I get it. And the thing that's really profound, I think, about this moment is it establishes scale. Because that spaceship's actually really small compared to this area it's landed in, and it gives you a sense of how darn big this moon base really is. And of course, in 1965, when they were filming this, it was just assumed that we would have a base on the moon in 2001.
Yeah, that's right. The Arthur Clarke actually said to Stanley Kubrick, the next time they do a movie in space, it'll be on location. That is how convinced Arthur C. Clarke was that with the progression of the space race going from Mercury to Gemini and then later Apollo, all going from Alan Shepard's 15-minute flight to landing on the moon in just 8 years. We certainly should have been by that point, especially in 2018, let alone 2001. But Nixon cut the budget, and
that's what's so sad is we landed on the moon the first time in July of '69, and for the last time in December of '72, and we never went back.
Never went back. Mankind has not been any further than low Earth orbit. However, Voyager 1 is in interstellar space,
way out there.
Which is very, very cool. And then it's going to come back to us as
V'ger.
That's right. Speaking of long space docking scenes,
also
around the Enterprise.
Also designed by Douglas Trumbull.
Yeah, there we go. Right. No surprise.
And now we're in this meeting. This is such a Kubrick scene.
Yeah.
It's the 1 point perspective with the ceilings, these bright reflective walls.
Yeah, the lights on the walls.
Wide shots.
Shadowy figures at times,
And this guy and it's all very formal. And it's so funny comparing this to his last film, Dr. Strangelove. Dr. Strangelove was dialogue heavy, passionate, funny, chaotic,
dark, short,
dark.
Yeah.
And
funny.
This is slow and distant and emotionally detached. And Haywood Floyd gets up to make his speech, and we hear now officially that this whole idea of this contagious disease is made up, and it's because of some discovery.
Congratulations on your discovery, which may well prove to be among the most significant in the history of science. Now, I know there have been some conflicting views held by some of you regarding the need for complete security in this matter. More specifically, your opposition to the cover story.
And it's funny, he's not very sympathetic to these guys.
No, he's not. He says, like, we're just going to have to keep it going for as long as we have to keep it going. And we really appreciate everything you've done. He's just giving them the lip service of a bureaucrat because he's the science advisor to the president.
Well, and he has a great political response, which is something like, I completely sympathize with your negative view. Which is such a, like, fuck you.
Yeah.
I
hear you. I understand you. I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do anything. Yeah, nothing's going to change. And then at the end, he kind of asked them for like loyalty oaths or something.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. I mean, and there's very strained applause. He kind of says, look, this is a big discovery. You guys are going to be remembered, but we're going to do this way.
Yeah.
And it's obvious, those Russians were right to be worried about something. They have discovered something. They are breaking this treaty, and they are,
some new tool.
A new tool. Exactly right.
So this brings us to the moment on the moon bus.
Yep.
And again, another ominous mood-setting score.
Yep.
Lux Eterna, composed by the same person who did Requiem. This building sort of like, and it's a little more soothing. It's a little more alien-like. Whereas the other two scores that we heard, not including the opening one, they're almost like unsettling. This one sort of like Lux Eterna. I like the way it just sort of depicts an alien landscape as you see the moon bus flying across the surface of the moon.
Right.
And that's when you find this very interesting fact about the monolith, that it was deliberately buried 4 million years ago.
Right.
And that 4 million years ago was right after that moment it implanted the consciousness into the man-apes.
Yep.
I think that's the assumption. I don't think we can know that, but I think you have to assume that.
Yeah.
Is that they said, okay, they're ready there. Let's plant this. They're going to find this 4 million years
Okay,
from now.
and that brings us to the point. What made 2001 the year, not the film? What made that moment? I'm jumping way ahead, but what made that moment the right moment to advance humanity's step of evolution again? And okay, the monolith 4 million years ago had this implanted intelligence into the man-apes. It disappeared, was buried on the moon. If humanity is evolved enough to uncover the monolith on the moon, if humanity has the technology and the intelligence to follow its transmission to Jupiter, then it will be worthy of the next step of its evolution.
Right, good point. Yeah.
It is literally just a very simple through line that goes, you go from the monolith on Earth 4 million years ago to the monolith on the moon. Okay, we found this. We've achieved space travel. Okay, now we're going to follow the beam to the moon, to Jupiter. And it's like, okay, you win. Follow me. That's it. That's
I
really
agree.
it.
I agree. That's exactly what I think of it too.
Like the intelligence behind the monolith is not going to come back to Earth and do what it did 4 million years ago. It's like, no, you passed one test. You were smart enough to use the bone as a weapon,
Right.
or for your survival,
Yep.
so you could keep going. The next test will be if you can get to Jupiter and pass all these tests, then you are worthy of evolving.
Well, this is what's interesting. I think there's a chicken and the egg that's hard to decipher, which is it the human coming up with the thing that leads the monolith to give us the next thing, or is it the monolith giving the human the idea to come up with the thing?
Well,
And I think it's a little of both, because I think what you say is that he doesn't think of using the bone as a tool until after his experience with the monolith in the first one.
Right.
But we can't get to the monolith until we learn enough to go to the moon, and we can't get to the monolith outside of Jupiter until we know enough to do that. Right. So there's a different, and again, this is that by the way, I completely agree with your interpretation of this idea of the connection with evolution and the monolith sort of waiting for us and sending us in this certain direction. what's weird about this movie is there is still an unknowable element of like, what are the intentions here? And where I go to, this is sort of where my theory is that I kind of at the end go, this is a movie, and it's what it really is Kubrick is talking to us. That's the real. There's no monolith,
Yeah.
This is a metaphor. We're into metaphorical space.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's really where the juicy stuff is.
Well, so when now all the astronauts or the scientists that are on the moon bus, we see it land, of course, because we have to see everything land. Now, so when the scientists make their way over to the buried monolith, which has been excavated around it so they can walk down and get close to it, they are all
It's
wearing
a huge set, by the way.
Yeah.
Huge.
they are all wearing spacesuits.
Yeah.
They all look exactly alike, just like the apes.
Well, the apes wouldn't say that. I mean, you say they all look alike.
They all look the same. But the apes, for better, if you get up close to them, they look different. But from a distance, they all look the same.
That's a fair point.
And from a distance, the astronauts, the scientists in their matching silver spacesuits all look the same. And as they slowly make their way down the platform to get close to the monolith, just like that moment 4 million years ago where a man-ape had the courage to reach out and touch the monolith and feel it up and down, you see Haywood Floyd in his spacesuit do the same motion in the exact same time frame of looking at it and reaching out. And there's even a close-up on his hand caressing the monolith. Probably the least subtle moment that you'll find in a Kubrick film to accentuate that he is doing the same exact motion in the same exact way that the apes did 4 million years ago. So again, technology has advanced, all that stuff is great, but not much has really changed.
Well, and the distance between the technology of the apes and the whatever the hell the monolith is, and the distance between the technology of the human astronauts and whatever the hell the monolith is still extreme. You know what I mean? It's like the apes might have been 1,500 miles away from that, and the humans are now 1,400 miles away from that. You know what I mean? Like, you still get the sense this monolith is way beyond them.
Yeah.
Just one thing on the filmmaking thing is that throughout this whole film, we've really been in static shots and a few dolly shots, and these shots in the spaceships with, the gimbals and rotating cameras and things. But everything's moved really slow and really smoothly. As we go down into the excavation pit, we're suddenly in handheld camera shots. Totally different look. And who's hand holding the camera? Stanley Kubrick. And it just, I think part of it is the contrast with everything we've been before to suddenly be in this handheld. It has a lot of tension and a lot of, chaos to it. And we're not going to see handheld again until much later in the movie.
And of course, now you are hearing the score for Requiem again.
Yeah.
And the timing of the score as the scientists are making their way around the monolith.
Posing for pictures. And
yes, posing for pictures. And just as they are posing for pictures, for the first time in 4 million years, sunlight hits the monolith.
Yes.
Sunlight hits the monolith. That is what causes the monolith to send a radio beam to Jupiter to alert its makers that humanity has achieved the capacity for space travel. That's what's going on there.
Wow.
For the first, I never understood why that moment for the monolith to pitch this beam. Okay, well, the sunlight is hitting the monolith for the first time. That could only have happened if somebody dug it up.
It's
if
funny,
somebody dug it up, then they're going to be smart enough maybe to get to Jupiter.
I never thought it was the sun hitting it for the first time, because I don't think I know that the sun is hitting it for the first time.
You don't?
I think it was them touching it for the first time. I think it was the contact.
Okay, I thought that too.
But it could be either. We
Well,
don't
that's
know.
true.
But
That's
I
why we do
definitely
this show.
But I definitely think that yes, it is said. Okay, it's time. They've achieved space travel, and then we get this title: Jupiter mission. 18 months later.
18 months from now, you're in the year 2001.
And the protagonist completely changes.
Yep.
Yes,
Like,
it is.
Floyd
Well,
is vulnerable.
And by the way, one thing we should say is this is 55 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
and we're suddenly switching protagonists. We've had minimal dialogue. We've had minimal character development. There's no character conflict really that we could talk about. Like there's a lot of tension and a lot of thought and design. This is unlike any other movie we've ever talked about.
This spacecraft, the SS Discovery, is nothing like any science fiction spacecraft we've ever seen.
Yeah.
This one is absolutely practical. And it looks a lot like a sperm.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is shaped like a sperm.
Which will come into play later on.
Yes, it will.
We get into the...
We'll get into it.
Yeah. Sorry.
So we move inside the spaceship.
We're inside the spaceship.
And
it is... They're bored to tears.
Yeah.
We need to get some exercise. Let's take a little run
I
around.
love running.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, first of all, this is Gary Lockwood.
Yes.
And what was he doing like a year after this?
He was doing the second pilot for Star Trek, where No Man's Gone Before. He was Gary Mitchell.
He's Gary Mitchell?
He's Gary Mitchell.
Crazy Gary Mitchell?
He's Gary Mitchell with the silver eyes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. We're,
I love
you'd like
Gary
what you see?
Mitchell.
Absolute power corrupting. Absolutely. All right. I'm crossing the stream.
I want to go down the path. I love that episode.
I do too.
It's one of my favorites.
It's not just a great pilot. It's one of the best episodes of the series.
I think it's great.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
So he's running around, and what we had to say, we talked about this idea of a set on a gimbal. This is, as far as I know, the biggest set on a gimbal ever made.
That's correct.
They called it the Ferris wheel, and
Makes sense.
What's happening in this is that the camera is attached to the set. This huge wheel is rotating around, and he's essentially running in place as this huge set rotates around him. And then they have one where the camera appears to be moving behind him. Yeah. So what's happening is he is either, when it's behind him, he's running slightly uphill, I think. No, when it's behind him, he's running slightly downhill, right. And the camera is now not attached to the set and is rotating through the set with him. And then, but the other one where he's running slightly uphill, and again, the camera is not attached to the set. And these are extremely, extremely difficult shots to do, and it is so cool.
I always thought, not always, I guess, but it has occurred to me as I've watched it over and over again that this moment, we are the gerbil in the wheel for God.
Totally.
And we were running around this thing in slow motion.
Yep.
And I was like, that's 18 months on this mission to get to where we're going. And that's what we are. For the extraterrestrials or for God, we are this hamster in the wheel.
Well, and the other thing watching the hamster in the wheel is the red eye of Hal.
Hal. Oh,
Hal
man.
9000, voiced by Canadian actor Douglas Rain.
If you are a voiceover artist, Hal is what you strive to achieve because it is an iconic voice. There's maybe 5 people that could tell you what he looks like nowadays, and it is phenomenal. A phenomenal performance.
It is a phenomenal performance. It is also the only character in the film that you feel any sort of empathy for.
Interesting.
It is
interesting.
An artificial intelligence.
I would say certainly the most empathy. I mean, by far. I mean, I have a little empathy for Moonwatcher. I have a little empathy for Dave.
Bowman, yeah.
Sure, Dave.
But no, Hal's the most compelling. And one thing, you might have already known this, but I didn't know this until yesterday, is that Dennis Rain? No.
Douglas Rain.
Douglas Rain, he worked for one day. 9 hours.
Did not know that.
9 hours
What?
doing voiceover.
Holy crap.
And the other
That's what you want.
Isn't that crazy?
What day?
And the other thing, so originally Kubrick thought it was going to be a woman named Athena. That was the original name. And then the first actor he was thinking about was Martin Balsam.
Oh, great voice.
Great voice, not what Hal is.
Yeah.
And then what's really funny is, of course, when you're on the set, that guy's not on the set. So you have to so you just pick someone to read it. And so he had his AD read it, who I have his name somewhere in my notes, but I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
But apparently Gary Lockwood described his accent as Michael Caine. So they had Michael Caine to do all their dialogue
What
with.
you doing there, Dave?
Sorry, Dave, I can't do that. This conversation serves no purpose.
And so we see this shot of Hal's eye, and we see a reflection, like a rotating person, which I think is Dave, coming out, and then Dave climbs down a ladder and we see Frank, which is Gary Lockwood, who is sitting eating his meal, and Dave is above him on the other side of the wheel, and then Dave walks around the wheel down to join Frank where he's having
So how
dinner.
did they keep Gary Lockwood in place?
So this is where thinking about how they did what they did is amazing because of course we're on a Ferris wheel, and that when Dave climbs down the ladder to the base of the Ferris wheel, that means that Frank is hanging upside down from the ceiling, eating strapped in, which was food is falling, and of course one little bit of food gets on the set, you got to shut down for a couple hours, and B, food's going up his nose, and I mean and he's hanging up there for hours trying to get this shot right. That is crazy.
But this is also where you see Frank and Dave, they are watching the news.
Yep.
They are watching a news report about themselves.
We spoke with Mission Commander Dr. David Bowman and his deputy, Dr. Frank Poole. Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. How's everything going?
Marvelous. We have no complaints.
And it's actually a pretty brilliant way to establish who they are, what the mission is,
And how long they've been on this mission.
and how they really don't have to say anything because they're just sitting there eating.
So they're listening to this BBC phone call, and we should say that that Dave is Carrie Dulea, and these aren't big actors or anything, and they're watching themselves in this BBC interview, and they talk about that there were 5 men on board, 3 of them are in suspended animation, and that's to save life support stuff, and that of course the 6th member of the crew is the HAL 9000.
We next spoke with the HAL 9000 computer, whom we learned one addresses as Hal. Good afternoon, Hal. How's everything going?
Good afternoon, Mr. Amer. Everything is going extremely well.
And they talk about the fact that Hal has feelings.
Yep.
And Hal is sentient.
Yeah.
Well,
and then
hold on.
Yeah, okay.
About that.
He's getting to that point.
Well, I just don't. I mean, he appears sentient, but this is one of the themes of the movie. Is that what is the nature? If you can talk to a computer and he can talk back to you and sound like one of us, does that mean that he's sentient?
Interesting. We're gonna have a nice debate on this one throughout the rest of the movie.
Well, this is. I mean, so, and what we had to go to is we had to go to the Turing test, and the Turing test is Alan Turing, who we just had a movie about, one of the founders of computer science, and he came up with this idea that at some point you could be having a conversation. It could be like text where you're typing, or you could actually be talking to a voice, and that at the point at which 30% of us would be fooled by that computer into thinking it is human, that computer has passed the Turing test. And we're by the way, right now at this moment, we are just about to pass it. And people have said this is a regular test that people have set up, and people have built whole computer systems and software systems to try to beat the Turing test, and we're right at that 30% moment. But the question, but no one thinks that any of these computers that are passing the Turing test are sentient,
right?
And the problem with this discussion and why it's impossible to really resolve is that we actually don't have a definition of what sentience or consciousness is. How do we know what consciousness is? Is that if someone is just saying things that sounds like they're talking, does that mean they are conscious?
I find consciousness, I mean, it's just an opinion, but I find consciousness to be defined when you are aware of your own mortality.
Yeah.
If you're aware of your mortality, and humanity is the only species that is aware of its own mortality.
You're saying my dog's not conscious?
Like
Well, I don't have a dog right now.
dogs don't think, oh man, I better stop eating all this good dog food or I'm going to die, die soon.
How do you know?
The dog will keep eating.
That's a good point.
sometimes
That's a
until
good
it
point.
gets too heavy.
How
Well,
do
this
you
is
know?
yeah. I actually do think animals are aware of their own mortality. But so one of the definitions of consciousness is aware of your own I-ness. Is that your own identity and your own perspective on that I am seeing this, that this is how I am interacting with the world. But it's a really hard thing to figure out. I mean, there are whole schools of philosophy debating how do we define what consciousness is, and this idea too of at what level of life does consciousness exist, and it's because animals seem to have feelings. They certainly show fear. They show joy. Does that mean that they are conscious, or are they sentient? And how do we get into that? And whether or not Hal is a sentient being is part of the key of this movie. I think everything in this movie is kind of telling us that he is.
Yeah.
And this is one of the discussions they're having. And one of the most interesting things is that they're asking, they ask Frank and Dave about Hal, and then they talk to Hal. And Hal says,
The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
At least it was.
well, how do you feel listening to this?
That's interesting. How do I feel listening to this? I feel like I feel like Hal's a little arrogant. And again, showing more depth as a character than Frank, Dave, Doc Haywood Floyd, anyone we've seen so far.
Well, this is so two things, because I totally agree. So the first thing is, this is classic hubris. A character at the beginning of the play, according to Aristotle, says a prideful thing. Well, their pride will be destroyed. That is classic tragedy. Right. And if a human had said to you, I never make mistakes, you would go, well, you're obviously wrong.
Right.
That you're either lying to yourself or you're going to make a mistake. And so that we have this, but when Hal says it, it's kind of like, do we accept this as truth? And then the second thing you say, which I totally agree with, is when they ask Frank and Dave questions, Frank and Dave are flat.
Yeah.
It's really weird how not human they are.
Do you believe that Hal has genuine emotions?
Well, he acts like he has genuine emotions. Of course, he's programmed that way to make it easier for us to talk to him. But as to whether or not he has real feelings is something I don't think anyone can truthfully answer.
Well, I think that's on purpose.
I agree.
I think he directs them to do that so that Hal stands out more. Because Hal is going to be the one that is, like you said earlier, Steve, he's going to be the compelling character now in this sequence of the film, in this section of the film. And yes, it's hubris. See, to me, that's why I think he is sentient. And you're right, other signs seem to point that he is sentient. He understands this need to show off. Humans understand that. And the need to feel secure. Humans understand that. And so, like, if the Hal says it's never made a mistake, you can be secure. Like this tool makes you secure. Hal makes me secure. This is something we've created, another tool. It makes me secure knowing Hal will take care of everything and no mistakes will be made.
Well, and one interesting thing, because we are at the dawn of AI right now.
Yeah.
Sorry, John.
Ah!
but it is that I was just listening to this because I listened
Fuck those robotics, Chicago people, wherever they are, creating those dogs.
Not only are we at the dawn of man, we're at the dawn of AI. Come on.
So I listened to a bunch of sort of geeky podcasts, and they were just talking about, we have Siri and Alexa and Google, whatever the Google one is.
Google Assistant, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things they've discovered is that they want you to use it, right? That's the goal. Apple wants you to use Siri, and Amazon wants you to use Alexa. And that if you say, hey, I won't say the words, hey, Alala, what's the temperature? And the thing comes back and says 73 degrees. That's not that interesting.
Right.
If you say, like, should I wear a sweater today? And they come back and say the weather today will be a high of blah, 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 and a low of this. We don't really like that much. But if it comes back and says, oh, John, you don't need a sweater today. Mm-hmm. It has a more human answer. Right. We respond better to that, and we use the service more often. And so right now what they're doing is programming these electronic assistants, which are AI, to respond to you in a way that is more human sounding.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean they're sentient.
Right.
It means they have been programmed to use this set of words rather than that set of words in order to make interacting feel more like you're interacting with a human.
I think something is sentient when it protects itself, when it defends itself. Right? That's what I think is sentient. And I think that's what's correlative in the movie throughout.
I think it has to want to defend itself.
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
so
but
the tool he uses, the bone, Hal does the same thing eventually.
Right, but if I have as I do, a machine gun mounted on my roof.
Sure.
And I have
You?
Oh yeah, of course. And I have a motion detector outside my house.
Yeah.
And the motion detector triggers the machine gun to fire when anyone comes into its range.
Right.
Is my house now sentient? It's
Nope.
defending itself.
Nope.
No, it has to think about
That's what I'm
defending
saying.
itself. But that's
It
the
makes
key difference.
decisions to defend itself that are not programmed in terms of, like you just said, you trip a wire, automatic response.
Right.
This is more analytical breakdown. This is what I'm going to do next.
It's
that
very
to
complicated.
survive. Yeah.
And of course, one of the other things they ask Hal is, how do you like acting, being with humans?
Yeah.
And he finds it very stimulating. Again, Hal's voice is
There's something creepy about it.
It is I think it goes into the idea of animation of the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Which it is so close to human but not quite human, and that makes it very creepy.
And it's a great performance by this guy.
It's great.
Absolutely, because again, there's empathy, there is feeling. He's a complex character.
Yes,
he is,
in the sense that he's been given a mission, but why did he make this malfunction?
Well, this is what's not knowable, and we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But we go through space a little bit longer. Frank is sunbathing, and Hal tells him he's got a transmission, and I think this is such an important moment. Is Frank says, "Oh, move me in a little closer," and Hal slides his little Betty's on. And the reason I think this is so important is it really shows you like Hal controls everything on the ship. They are 100% dependent upon this computer. And then Frank gets this birthday message from his family. And it is a weird scene.
He could care less.
Yes.
He's bored to tears.
Yes.
Well, and this is to your point of like, there's no emotion in these guys. He's just sitting there. And by the way, these are not TV screens. These are 16 millimeter rear projection, because TV screens, they hadn't solved the scanning problem in order to sync. It's a technical thing of syncing the film rate with the scan rate on the TV monitor. And so they have rear projection of 16 millimeter shooting up at that screen to make this work. And yeah, he's bored.
Listen, they're out in space for so long.
Yeah.
I mean, who can blame them?
Yeah, but you would think that you're bored in space and then you get a message from your family who you love.
Excited to hear.
You would be excited, but no, it's not.
Well, no, I don't know if after 18 months you'd be like, there's an apathy to it.
Well, then Hal says, "Yeah, happy birthday, Frank." Yes, thank you, Hal. A little lower, please. Like he, a little lower, please.
Well, and one of the interesting things, we'll see it. And so in the next scene, Frank is playing chess against Hal.
Yeah.
And there's several weird things about this scene.
Rook to King 1.
I'm sorry, Frank. I think you missed it. Queen to Bishop 3. Bishop takes Queen. Knight takes Bishop. Mate.
Yeah, looks like you're right. I resign.
So, in the chess game, Frank unsurprisingly loses the match. But here's it: I'm not a chess guy, but apparently chess people have said that there is a mistake in what Hal says on how he beat him. And the thing that's interesting about this is that Kubrick was a fantastic chess player.
Right.
Are you surprised to hear that?
As a young man, he used to hustle chess. That's how he made money.
Wow.
He would go to the park and make bets with people, and they saw this young kid, and he would just wipe them out. And so there's two possibilities, is that either A, Kubrick made a mistake in how he laid out this chess game. And look, I am against the idea of Kubrick as the uber genius who plans everything and makes no mistakes. That's not true. Or it's possible that Hal is already malfunctioning in the chess game when he makes a mistake.
Huh.
Oh, okay. Frank just didn't pick up on it.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting.
The way that they talk to Hal is very flat.
Yeah.
And it's like they are talking to him like they're talking to a person, but with no emotion. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, to me, it feels like they're going through the motions of talking to Hal like Hal is sentient. But maybe they don't. I don't know what they feel. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think they speak to Hal in that way because Hal is a computer, so they don't have to spend the time with inflection.
Yeah.
It's very, to them, even though Hal has, in a way, progressed past them, they think because they've created it, they have to speak to it in a way that's like what people used to make fun of in the old days of those jokes where you're yelling to the person who's a foreigner. You're like, I'm telling you to go. And it's as if they're somehow
not deaf.
Yeah, as if they're going to understand you better if you yell. It's that kind of thing. But
they do
in
still
reverse.
say, like, please and thank you.
Well, yeah. Because,
but they don't have a feeling of gratitude or.
Do you think they know, like, that's what I wonder. And I want to ask you both this. They've been 18 months, all right? This shit with Hal that's about to go down throughout the rest of the sequence of this section of the movie, do you think they've had any suspicions because of how they're talking to Hal that Hal has this ability to hurt them?
I think that is a great question.
It's a great question.
What do you think, Scott?
I don't think
Layup.
so, because I don't think, based on the decision they were going to make, that they never got a chance to do until Dave did it on his own.
Yeah.
I don't think that either one of them ever thought or worried that Hal might turn on them or that there might be something wrong. Why would they put themselves so far out to deep space if they and surrender themselves to a computer that might malfunction or a computer that might turn on them?
Okay.
But the unease that the conversation that they have is unsettling.
Yes.
Because Hal sounds nervous.
So here's my answer to your question.
Okay.
Is that for my answer, I have to go back. So Haywood Floyd, he comes onto the space station. He exchanges pleasantries with people, but there's no real connection.
Yeah.
He talks to his daughter about her birthday, and there's no real connection.
Right.
Then he has a completely fake conversation with these Russian scientists who he does seem to have a past relationship with. Yeah. And yet in that conversation, he gives no actual personal contact with them. Then he makes a speech in this meeting to these people where he says, I sympathize with your negative views, and yet has no real human sympathy with them at all.
Right.
And then we get onto the spaceship where these two people are completely disconnected.
This is interesting.
And I think this is a movie about the future of that the men have become machines. That we have
absolutely, yes.
We have, in order to go do this, that the world of Frank and Dave is so formalized that there isn't the rule. Everyone's behaving correctly, and no one is being human.
And I think in addendum to what you just said, maybe Haywood programmed these machines like Hal. Because you find out later that as Hal is dying, that Hal says he was programmed in the same plant where the first IBM computer was ever created. And so I wonder if Floyd has a thing where it's portrayed this way. So you speak to it this way because it's pleasantries, but no real connection.
So, by the way, a whole bunch of people say this isn't true, but it is interesting that Hal, H-A-L, is one letter away from IBM.
Oh,
boom.
Wow.
Boom.
So this chess game, not
whoa.
But everyone who worked on the movie, including Arthur C. Clarke, says no, that has nothing. We didn't do that.
Bullshit.
No,
He says the plant.
That is a great.
He says the plant when he's dying. All right.
In the next scene, Dave is doing some drawings. Hal seems very interested in these drawings. Bring it a little closer. And again, here is this completely false surface conversation with all the human connection taken out of, oh, your drawings are very good. I think you've improved.
At that moment, the conversation shifts.
Yes.
And becomes a genuine conversation initiated by Hal.
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No, not at all.
Well, forgive me for being so inquisitive. But during the past few weeks, I've wondered whether you might be having some second thoughts about the mission.
Now, Hal knows what the mission is, but he was not instructed to discuss the true mission with the crew.
Right.
So that, at least this is what we found out in 2010, was, a computer was instructed to lie. And that's why he malfunctioned.
Well, and this is the thing. This is where, because a long time ago I read 2001. The arts. It was a long time.
Yeah.
I don't remember. And of course, I didn't like it as much. And part of what I don't like it as much, and this is why my understanding is that Kubrick didn't really like it, is it explains stuff. Is that the knowledge of that makes this movie less mysterious.
That's true. Right. Yes, of course.
But that is certainly one of the main theories. And it's interesting the way Hal talks in this scene, because he says things like,
it's rather difficult to define. Perhaps I'm just projecting my own concern about it. I know I've never completely freed myself of the suspicion that there are some extremely odd things about this mission. I'm sure you'll agree there's some truth in what I say.
And these are all very human, conscious ways of speaking. Yep. But he also says it in the flat Hal tone, and so everything feels a little bit off. And then you see Dave being cagey about it.
Well, I don't know. That's a rather difficult question to answer.
You don't mind talking about it, do you, Dave?
No, not at all.
Well, certainly no one could have been unaware of the very strange stories floating around before we left. Rumors about something being dug up on the moon. I never gave these stories much credence. But particularly in view of some of the other things that have happened, I find them difficult to put out of my mind. For instance, the way all our preparations were kept under such tight security, and the melodramatic touch of putting Doctors Hunter, Kimball, and Kaminsky aboard, already in hibernation after 4 months of separate training on their own.
And then there's a pause, and then Dave
Just a moment.
says, no, wait, before that. And Dave says, you're working up your crew psychology report.
Yes.
And then Hal kind of goes, yeah, you got me.
Yeah.
Was he working up his crew psychology report?
Why the pause? Like, why the pause from Hal's response?
Well, no, Dave pauses sort of for a moment.
I think they're both questioning each other of what the other one knows and what the other one doesn't. They're sizing each other up.
Yeah.
And then he does the left turn. Oh, I'm sorry. A moment. Just a moment.
Okay, well, hold on. I want to get there.
No,
but
we're already there, though.
No, but I have. What
do you want from this other moment? I'm trying to find out what you want.
Well, because so there's two possibilities. So particularly assuming that Hal's a sentient being.
Yeah.
One possibility is that Hal is actually genuinely concerned about why they launched on this mission and wants to and cares about what Dave thinks, and that is why he's asking him these questions.
Okay.
But he also says you're working on your crew psychology report, and Hal goes, "Yes, I am."
Right.
Which means that Hal at sometimes does a crew psychology report where he interviews the crew members in some ways to find out their emotional and psychological state.
Right.
So my question is, was this questioning about how we left part of the crew psychology report, in which case Hal is not concerned about how they left and doesn't have an emotional state about this stuff?
Right.
Or does Hal actually have concerns because he says, this seems sort of weird. I don't know how to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, are we hearing actual emotions from Hal, or are all the emotions a bullshit way of getting into Dave's psychology? That is my question.
But at that moment, when they're sizing each other up, John, you just pointed out the timing of when Hal fabricated the malfunction in the AE-35 unit.
Right. I think he's doing more than just the report.
Yeah,
I think he's sizing them up and he's lying about the report. He's saying you got me because it's perfect cover, and then deflects. As a human being or a sentient thing would when it's caught.
And by the way, there is a pause when Dave says you're preparing your crew psychology report. There is a pause before Hal answers.
Yes.
Like he doesn't know how to answer the question.
Right. And he's analyzing how should I answer the question so the human asking me will feel
the distraction.
Okay. Yeah.
Then the big distraction.
Hold on. I have to interrupt though, because this is the
you are caught up in this moment.
Well, this is like one of the most important moments of the film.
This is the fulcrum moment for you.
I think it definitely is. So you said he fakes the report on the failure of the piece of equipment.
Yes.
It could be he makes a mistake. We don't know that he's faking this. See, this is the thing, is that let's say that the mistake in the chess he doesn't know about. He could be failing. And let's say in this moment, in this conversation before, this conversation is fucking up his logic boards on some level.
Right.
And so that causes a malfunction in the sensory things that causes that, because this is one of the key things is Hal wrong or is Hal lying or and then because the next thing that's going to happen later on is the threat to Hal's life comes either because did he lie and get caught in a lie, or did he make a mistake and now he's flawed? And I don't think we can know the answer to this question.
But, well, I think if you look at what Hal does to the crew in hibernation, I think this is, I always thought that this was a deliberate move on Hal's part because of the way I always thought that he deliberately messed up the AE-35 unit to, well, wait a minute. Okay, now hang on. Now, oh man. All right, my mind is really.
I thought
blown.
you'd figured it out. I was told at the beginning of this podcast that you'd figured out this whole
Well,
movie.
I figured out the whole
The theme.
the
he's got.
progression of the evolution, but the detail about like did Hal just mess up, or was Hal being manipulative of the situation?
I think he's being manipulative because I think he knows the humans are delaying the mission. Because the humans have to breathe.
Humans delay
The
the
humans
mission.
because Hal could do it himself way quicker than these people.
But if
They need to sleep, they need to breathe, they need to all this bullshit that he doesn't need to do, and so he has to.
In the end, he decides like after that.
They're useless to him.
okay, first of all,
You want to answer the question? That's my answer to the question.
first of all, of course, they're useless to him.
Yes.
But Hal doesn't decide to kill them. Spoiler alert! That until after he reads their lips. I don't think Hal has any intention of killing
because
them.
he doesn't have to. They're in hibernation. They're irrelevant to him.
To
at
me,
this point.
the act of
They're no
killing
threat.
them, is self-defense.
Right.
That's why he kills them, because he sees that they're about to kill him.
and he's got a mission to do.
Well, but he doesn't. But then the other issues, and this goes into what is the nature of sentience? Is Hal actually having emotions, or is he not having emotions? Does he have pride? And is the pride, because if it's pride, the pride is because the Hal back on Earth.
Yeah.
We're jumping a little of the timeline here, but the Hal back on Earth says there is no malfunction in this device, and therefore he's made a mistake. It is his shame around making a mistake that is leading him to make these bad choices, or is he a computer that's malfunctioning? And a computer that, by the way, it's
tell
not.
us your answer.
I don't know. No, I really don't know.
Well, you can't ask us a question and then not have a fucking answer.
Yeah,
That's not
You're
right.
putting this on us.
Yeah, this is the
That's not
Cine-Files.
fair.
No.
Cine-questioners. Answer the question.
I have pointed out many different
Well, Hal,
possibilities.
what's the answer, Hal?
I don't know.
Well,
I said I don't know if Hal's sentient. That's also I don't know.
You got to make a decision,
Guys.
here.
No, I don't.
Guys, Hal's motive to kill the astronauts is after he reads their lips and they're going to shut him down.
Right.
So
but then why is Hal like what's he doing now? Is he malfunctioning, or is he just is it a
lying?
deliberate malfunction, or is he just did he just make a mistake?
Well, because if he's lying, it's a bad plan. Because if he's there, because he says there's a malfunction in the A35 unit, 100% failure in 72 hours, and he says that 72 hours figure is completely reliable. Well, this is a terrible lie, because this is obviously something that we can prove is not going to happen. And Hal is really smart, so it seems like a strange lie. But what we decide is, yes, we're going to go out. The only thing we can do is go replace it. And so now we go out to let's go to work.
Open the pod doors, Hal.
And so as Dave prepares to leave the safety of the Discovery in the pod, we have reached the end of part 1 of our exploration of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. As always, you can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. You can buy 2001 and every other movie we've ever reviewed at Cine-Files.net. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and on YouTube. If you're on iTunes, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. If you want to suggest a movie that we do or support the show, you can do so at patreon.com/thecine-files. And as always, you can reach me on Twitter at SRMorris. You can reach John on Twitter and on Instagram at TheRocaSays. And you can reach our special guest, Scott Mantz, at MovieMantz. And I think that's it for this week. We'll be back next week for part 2 of 2001, A Space Odyssey.